Marjorie Taylor Greene decided that she was going to initiate a motion to vacate today. Now, she had been talking about initiating a motion to vacate to try to quote unquote get back at Mike Johnson for him helping to pass Ukraine aid 6 months late. She should feel grateful that she got to delay Ukraine aid for 6 months. I mean, I think it, has a certain amount of blood on your hands for delaying it for 6 months when then you pass the same bill anyway. So all you did was delay aid to an ally, didn't stop it, didn't show a real policy shift. All we did was delay aid to an ally during a crucial period of the war while they were facing a shell shortage. But she should be happy that she at least accomplished something. She was able to get some blood on her hands, but no. She needed to have the Republicans with their 2 to, I think, 1 seat effective majority now. I think like 4 seat actual, 1 seat voting majority. She believes that they should just get everything they want. They should get all of the Trump immigration reforms. They should defund the FBI, which isn't even everything all Republicans want. Something she and some other Republicans want. That they're going to get all of these priorities, even though they only control 1 chamber and just barely. They were going to do they deserve all the immigration reform. They deserve to institute Trump-era immigration reform, even though Trump lost campaigning on said immigration reform against the candidate who campaigned against said immigration reform. When you lose those elections, you don't get to lead the way on all of the campaign or all the policy reform. You lost on the issue, so you have to compromise to get what you can. But because of her and other people like Donald Trump, who thought it was politically inconvenient to have compromises like that at the moment, nothing was done. And since nothing was done, a bunch of people, Chip Roy and others included, feel kind of embarrassed going back to their constituents saying, oh, what did we do in Congress? Nothing. And so they want to get something done, but when all they'll accept is all or nothing, when they don't have the votes to pass all or nothing, they're in a rock and a hard place where they're making basically impossible demands of Mike Johnson, and their demands also seem to go against the national security priorities of the United States. And eventually, after Mike Johnson was scared enough in a private intelligence hearing about what would happen if they really stopped all the Ukraine aid, as the Russian breakthrough became not really impossible anymore, but at least slightly possible as the shell shortage got worse and worse and worse, he was spurred into action. And this was one of the initiating moments that pushed her into really heavily considering going through with a recall vote. But now, after being held back by colleagues, after she had openly acknowledged how politically risky it would be and the political consequences of putting through a recall vote, because if they actually recall Mike Johnson, that could lead to, quite frankly, another era of Republican chaos before the elections, when many Americans are asking, can Republicans govern? I mean, we have had the least productive House session since the Great Depression, possibly might go on record as one of the least productive House sessions in American history. It already is that, but it's going to move off the rankings, maybe get to the top if we keep at it. And she just wants to add to that. Is she like aiming for that record? Is that what Republicans would be aiming for? And so other Republicans know it could be political suicide going into this election, when Republicans are at a real threat of losing their very slim majority in the House. But she has decided to go through with it anyway. Now, why would Marjorie Taylor Greene go through with this anyway, considering the political risk? Well, it could be that if she doesn't pull the trigger in the future when she tries to use these type of hostage tactics in order to get political concessions, it won't feel like there's any weight to them. If she only makes a threat, makes another threat, Mike Johnson ignores it, moves forward, ignores it, moves forward again, because the demands are ridiculous, then maybe she won't be able to concede anything or get anything through this tactic. So if she pulls the trigger every once in a while, it'll continue to have weight. Maybe that's why. Maybe it's because she's genuinely angry at Mike Johnson and wants to, quote unquote, send a message. I remember people were talking about the forced to vote crowd when it was about making them have a vote on Medicare for all and just forcing it on principle. Now, I don't think that was really politically advantageous or strategically going to lead to anything. But if you're angry enough about it, care enough about it, maybe just on principle you believe in bringing it forward. Maybe she wants to bring it forward so she can please the grouping of Republicans that support her in the MAGA crowd. Maybe it's just complete spite, which I don't think is completely impossible with a person like her. It could be any number of factors. And either way, Mike Johnson is facing a recall vote after she finally pulls the trigger. Here's the moment in question.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Georgia seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Clause 2A1 of Rule 9, I seek recognition to give notice of my intent to raise a question of the privileges of the House. The form of the resolution is as follows. Declaring the office of Speaker of the House of Representatives to be vacant.
Damn. Just a wave of boo. And that was bipartisan boos. That was like bad comedy in a small little comedy store boos. Like everyone, boo, get off the stage. That's, oh God, you know what is, I mean, that was like that SpongeBob episode where Squidward keeps going out, just boo, just a whole crowd, nothing. There's just no love. I don't think I heard a single cheer. Is there any cheers in the audience? Is she completely alone on Mount Olympus?
Of Speaker of the House of Representatives to be vacant.
Not a single cheer. There's not a single person in there who appreciates this. Or if they are, they're keeping their mouths shut.
This is the uniparty for the American people watching.
Gentlelady will suspend.
Okay, so the uniparty. For those of you who don't know, you might not be familiar with this phrase. The uniparty is this idea that Republicans and Democrats are not really all that different. There's like right-wing versions of this and left-wing versions of this. She prescribes to maybe a more right-wing version of this. And the uniparty is basically the quote-unquote establishment. And you can tell that because these are the people who can either find compromise on issues, or these are people who agree on issues, both good and bad. There's issues that both Democrats and Republicans agree on that I think are bad when it comes to certain support for certain countries overseas, despite no matter what they do. And there are issues that is, I think, good. Like, for example, there are people who both believe in the Republican and Democratic parties within what she would probably call the uniparty, that there should be a peaceful transfer of power, and maybe having Trump be king forever is not a good idea. So the uniparty is just the people who, quote unquote, either defend the establishment to make it more vague and more directed towards their rhetoric, but a lot of times just ends up being the people in the middle, not on the fringes, who end up voting together, both Democrat, Republicans, on certain issues. For example, in this case, it was the uniparty, in their perspective, coming together to defend their warrior, Mike Johnson, because Democrats had came out and said and indicated that they were not going to vote with Republicans to oust Mike Johnson for a few reasons. Number one, Mike Johnson put through Ukraine aid 6 months late. So, you know, and it was the same bill, really. They can put as many bells and whistles on it as they please. It was the same bill. So they delayed it for no good reason. Blood on the hands, whatever. But they put it through eventually anyway. And so there could be a feeling of, you know, we want to pay this back in some manner. There's also probably some feeling of, do we really just want another month of chaos when maybe we could actually get something done in the House, try to find something to do? Do we really want that month of chaos? It might be politically advantageous against the Republicans, but don't we actually want to pass stuff? Don't they actually want to like rename all those different mailboxes around the country, which is the one thing they can seem to still get done, just renaming different mailboxes after dead people? Hey, Bop and Wap, thank you for gifting a tier 1 sub to Jaden Ryan. I appreciate that. Anyway, that's the idea of the uniparty that she's talking about and trying to call out right now. The establishment in its purest form in her framework.
Order.
Okay, so at that point, she then spoke for a while about why she was doing what she was doing. Now, a lot of news stations straight up didn't know this was going to happen. And so if you check out the CBS News broadcast,
Party speaker will not give the speaker's gavel to the
right in the middle. And the reason it starts right in the middle of her statement is because she did not tell the press she was going to do this today. She just did it. So a lot of news stations just heard like, oh my God, it's happening. They turned on C-SPAN and they were like, oh my God, it is happening. And then just went to the feed and connected it. So if you go and you look this up, most of the broadcasts you're going to find start like midway through her statement. In fact, I wonder if we should go get the C-SPAN broadcast specifically so we can make sure we get everything and not just when they tuned in. Let's try to do that. And let's listen to her speech. Let's listen to her reasoning. Maybe she'll convince us. Who knows?
Resolution is as follows.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Georgia seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Clause 2A1 of Rule 9, I seek recognition to give notice of my intent to raise a question of the privileges of the House. The form of the resolution is...
Can I just say, I kind of like watching the Marjorie Taylor Greene stuff in the same reason that I kind of like watching the kid tap the glass at like the monkey zoo and watching the monkeys freak out. Like it's, you know, it's mean-spirited in some way, you know, I acknowledge that, but it is entertaining watching them chimp out.
Is as follows. Declaring the office of Speaker of the House of Representatives to be vacant.
Not a single person in there showing any appreciation. Just pure like fuck off on every level. Just, I'm sorry, it's so overwhelming.
This is the uniparty
And everyone hates me. It's just because the establishment.
for the American people watching.
Gentlelady will suspend. Order. Order. The gentlewoman from Georgia is recognized.
Whereas the House Republican Conference elected Mike Johnson on October 25th, 2023, after 3.5 weeks of trying to decide on a new Speaker of the House.
Mr. Speaker, the House is not in order.
House will be in order. Gentlewoman from Georgia is recognized.
Whereas Mike Johnson sent the Republican Conference a letter making promises as to what type of speaker he would be and outlining his plans going forward. Mike Johnson put forth 7 tenets that would guide the conference under his speakership. Restore trust by ensuring total transparency, open processes, and regular order.
We'll suspend.
Dude, they can't even keep the place calm because everybody just wants her to leave. My goodness. Just pure disdain from everyone in there. But I will say, for Marjorie Taylor Greene supporters, that disdain will just fuel them because they hate the Uniparty. So the more the Uniparty hates them, the better they're doing, even if all they're doing is just being a pain in the ass.
The House will be in order.
This doesn't particularly bother me, though. It's the same, like, nothing changed from this, so it's kind of watching her chimp out a bit.
Gentlewoman from Georgia is recognized.
2, advance a comprehensive policy agenda supported by conference consensus. 3, promote individual members and thus the whole team by working to understand and emphasize each member's unique strengths, district dynamics and challenges, and individual goals and objectives. 4, engage members in productive working groups to formulate solutions in key policy areas and enhance our internal communications and team building. 5, effectively message to...
And there's a lot of, these are all very lofty goals for Mike Johnson, considering that he's never ever been in a position of power like this before. He has no experience a position even close to Speaker of the House before. He's a relatively new congressman, so he doesn't have that leadership history, and he was hoisted in to an incredibly divided not only country but party, with a very slim majority as the Democrats control the Senate and the presidency, and he had to actually get stuff done while also conceding to the fringes of his base, due to the fact that any one of them can call a recall vote like she's doing right now. So he kind of put himself in an unwinnable position. It's like when Rishi Sunak took the job from Liz Truss. Like, well, good job. You got a losing job. I hope you enjoy a year of losing. You know, you get what I'm saying? They took a ship already sinking.
Persuasively inform the Republican base and the American people of our policy agenda, why we are pursuing it, and how it will ensure liberty, opportunity, and security for all Americans. 6, build and utilize eternal coalitions in the conservative ecosphere, including think tanks, policy groups, and other allied organizations that can contribute to our efforts. 7, develop and grow our majority by building upon our resources and expanding.
Just laughing at her. I didn't hear what he said. I heard him say something about out of order, and then somebody laughed. They're just laughing at her.
To successfully advance our conservative vision and agenda. Whereas Speaker Johnson has not lived up to a single one of his self-imposed tenets. Whereas Speaker Johnson allowed the conference only one day rather than 72 hours to review a 1,000+ page bill to which no amendments could be offered, rather than ensure total transparency, open processes, and regular order. Whereas Speaker Johnson worked with Democrats to produce appropriations text, NDAA text, and other legislative items rather than with Republicans to understand and emphasize each member's unique strengths and engage with them.
Well, I mean, they are going to have to work with Democrats to some level, right? Because there's a Senate and it's controlled by Democrats. So if you just keep throwing legislation up there that's like MAGA town, what Marjorie Taylor Greene wants, it's going to get shot down every time. I'm sure if we let Bernie Sanders design all the labor policy, I don't think it has much of a chance of getting through a Republican-controlled House, does it?
Whereas Speaker Johnson relied...
Not saying that I'd be angry about such a scenario, just that I probably wouldn't end up actually becoming implemented policy.
On majority Democrat support to pass a 2-part omnibus spending bill rather than advancing a policy agenda supported by conference consensus. Whereas on December 1st, 2023, Speaker Johnson failed to protect the Republican majority when he allowed multiple votes to remove
I couldn't be in Congress, honestly, because I'd be in there with like a little, like one of those high-powered lasers, like flashing it in her eyes, throwing like paper airplanes, like rubber bands on the back of like one of those paperclip catapults, trebuchets.
Another Republican from the House of Representatives. It was unprecedented for a member to be removed from Congress by a 2/3 vote prior to conviction of a crime. To this day, the Republican expelled from the House under Speaker Johnson has not been convicted of a crime.
Oh, yes, bring back George Santos. So I don't know if you guys saw, but George Santos recently admitted that their drag character was real and started doing cameos in drag. Let's bring George Santos back into the House in drag as a Republican. Okay, we'll allow George Santos back in for the rest of the session on the condition that he has to do the session in drag on the Republican side. I'm more than comfortable with that.
Meanwhile, a Democrat now holds that seat. Whereas Speaker Johnson supported fully funding abortion,
By the way, George Santos committed a crime. He committed multiple crimes, and he keeps lying about the crimes he committed. And he lied about his record. He said his mom died in 9/11. Was a lie. He said he worked at a bunch of businesses he didn't work at. Said he went to a bunch of educational institutions he didn't go to. I mean, he committed fraud. I mean, he was stealing from fellow Congress people. I mean, the dude is a criminal. The dude's a huckster. He's funny, but I mean, being funny doesn't mean anything when it comes to whether he committed the crime or not. And it was all very obvious that he was, and he also was a disgrace. So, do you really want him still in there? Because when I look at like Senator Menendez and I see like the corruption scandal around him, my first thought isn't like, oh God, we need him in the Senate right now for Democrat. My first thought is the longer he's in the Senate, the more that rot, that stink of corruption is going to rub off on the institution, rub off on the party. Get him out of here, get him out of here, get him out of here. That's my first thought. I don't know why that's not the first thought of someone like Marjorie Taylor Greene when it comes to her own party. Those of you who don't know, Senator Menendez took literal gold bars from the Egyptian government with his wife.
Agenda, the climate agenda, foreign wars, and Biden's border crisis, rather than ensuring liberty, opportunity, and security for all Americans.
You hear that, guys? Mike Johnson passed the overwhelmingly supported Ukraine aid. And by passed, I mean he held a vote on it. And 73% of the House voted in favor of it because it was always overwhelmingly popular. And by doing that oh, and by the way, the majority of Republicans in the Senate as well. And by doing that dastardly thing, he had betrayed America because he didn't pass the Freedom in America bill. And because he could have increased our freedom points, but instead passed Ukraine aid. Like, what? Like, it's so opaque. It's so vague. He could have brought more freedom to America, but instead he brought more dollars to Ukraine. Like he could have. What was wrong with having a vote? I want to hear Marjorie Taylor Greene say, while aid doesn't even deserve a vote, why the democratically elected representatives that were sent to Congress shouldn't do their job and they shouldn't vote on all these things, and they should just sit there and only have votes on what Marjorie Taylor Greene likes. Because I thought the way it was supposed to work is there's bills that you like and then there's bills that you don't like. And the bills you like, you vote in favor of, and the bills you don't like, you vote against. And it wasn't that, well, I heard this one girl on the other side doesn't like this bill, so therefore we're just never going to vote on it ever. I don't like that very much. I like the other system better.
Whereas Speaker Johnson relied on Democrat votes on at least 2 occasions, with the first transgression occurring on March 22nd, 2024, with the House passage of H.Res. 1102, Part 2 of the Johnson-Schumer Omnibus, and the second transgression occurring on April 20th, 2024, with House passage of H.R. 8035, the $61 billion Ukraine funding bill. On both occasions, the majority of the majority.
Oh, were they clapping for the Ukraine aid? Was that what they were doing? Wait, let me hear that again.
Schumer Omnibus. And the second transgression occurring on April 20th, 2024, with House passage of H.R. 8035, the $61 billion Ukraine funding bill. On both occasions, the majority of the majority.
They were clapping and they were hooting and hollering over there.
Delay will suspend.
On both occasions, the majority of the majority, 112 Republicans, voted against the measures, while only 101 voted in favor. Whereas before Kevin McCarthy was ousted as Speaker, our conference had passed 7 appropriation bills, which were some of the strongest conservative bills passed in decades.
Wow. Man, I wonder who got rid of that McCarthy guy. Who voted to get rid of that on the Republican side? Who were, because if I remember correctly, it was 9 Republicans who sided with Democrats. Who were those people? What, does it happen to be a bunch of your Freedom Caucus buddies? Was that a smart move? Was it a smart move to get rid of Kevin? Looking back on that, wasting all that time. Well, shoulda, coulda, woulda.
Speaker Johnson refused to continue this important process. He instead led us to another CR on January 18th, 2024, and got it passed with the support of 207 Democrats. And
She's getting doggone so much.
Mr. Speaker, the House is not in order.
Ladies,
Wah, they're trolling me, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, stop it. Stop it, please. Please. It's a very unred pill.
and only 107 Republicans, while 106 Republicans voted against it. Whereas Speaker Johnson passed a third CR, this time calling it a...
It must be, I mean, she must realize that right now she's being treated like the literal circus act of Congress. Now that George Santos is gone, they need a new circus act, and it's 100% her. She must know to some degree that's how she's being treated. That's her legacy. Usually circus acts don't delay vital aid to military allies. You know, I like the little ponies that do tricks that don't kill Ukrainians.
Process CR, as if that made continuing Nancy Pelosi's budget yet again any different from the previous CRs. Whereas with little to no communication with our conference, Speaker Johnson passed the first minibus appropriations bill on March 6th and passed the second minibus appropriation bill 2 weeks later on March 22nd. Whereas a two-part omnibus split into two minibuses was crammed down our throats and passed under suspension of the rules with only 1 day to review it. Whereas Speaker Johnson's omnibus did nothing to stop Biden's deadly border invasion.
By the way, can I just say, they kept delaying a budget deal again and again and again and kicking it down the road to the point where Mike Johnson, in response to any like policy question like, hey, are we going to send aid to Ukraine? Are we going to do this? He'd just end up responding like, well, we got to pass the budget first, as if you can't do multiple things at the same time. But it kept getting kicked down the road. Like, maybe it would have been better or easier to vote on more stuff individually and not do a big omnibus if they had actually passed a budget bill, you know, before Kevin McCarthy was ejected. But Kevin McCarthy was ejected, and it was already into the next year when they were passing the omnibus. And considering that the next time you have to pass a budget is in September, do you really want to be passing a budget, what, in like May and June? Just like a few months before September, then you got to pass another one? I mean, like, if it wasn't so delayed, maybe it would have added for more flexibility, but it had to get through or the government was going to shut down. And while a government shutdown might be all fun and games for people who just treat government like, you know, a Tom Clancy novel, like it's some big LARP, when people actually, you know, get furloughed because of work and national parks get shut down and certain services start to shut down, it affects people. It affects the investor confidence. It affects the economy. It affects the country.
It fully funded it. Speaker Johnson did nothing to stop the energy-killing Green New Deal climate agenda. He fully funded it.
Woo! Sorry. And he didn't fully fund it. We're not nearly putting enough money into renewable energy production, but he did put some. Who would have thought that the president of the United States gets to have some dictation on climate policy? Oh!
He did nothing to stop the weaponized Department of Justice and FBI. He fully funded them. He did not.
So her complaint is that they didn't defund the Federal Bureau of Investigations. It was never going to pass. He was never going to get anything like that. It's not even something that I don't think that necessarily majority Republicans support. And even if it did, like, your majority is like a few seats and it's not getting through the Senate, certainly not getting across the president's desk. What's even her demand?
Nothing.
It cannot just be, if you didn't institute Trump-era immigration policy, you need to give deliverables that are deliverable.
To stop the trans agenda on kids. He fully funded it.
He didn't stop the trans agenda. What would that, how would he, what does that even mean? Like, that he would pass, and then get the Senate to pass, and then Biden to pass a bill stopping the trans agenda. Number one, that's too vague. I have no clue what that means. Does that mean stopping like hormone blockers? Does that mean stopping gender affirming care for youth? Does that mean stopping gender affirming care for all people? And you were going to pass that through the Democratic controlled Senate? Can you even get all the Republicans to sign on to a piece of legislation like that? I think some of them maybe could be convinced of governmental overreach. But like, what are these demands? None of these are deliverables. Like, if she said, you voted down on a vote on HR 2234, which would have stopped puberty blockers from being assigned to kids under the age of, like, then it's like, okay, this is a deliverable. There's a deliverable there, but this is all too vague and opaque.
He did nothing to stop full-term abortions. He fully funded them. He did nothing to stop the fueling of forever foreign wars.
What does that even mean? Like, funded the full-term abortions? Does she mean that there are instances where somebody having an abortion in the last term of pregnancy due to medical complications is allowed? Or like, what even is that? I don't know what that's in reference to.
He fully funded them. Whereas on April 18th, 2024, the Rules Committee passed HRES 1160, the rule providing for consideration of the $95 billion foreign funding package by a vote of 9-3. Notably, all Democrat members of the committee voted to advance the measure to the floor, while 3 Republicans opposed it. It is unprecedented for members of the minority party to advance a resolution out of the Rules Committee. Since 1995, there have been a few instances of rules advancing out of committee with minority support. However, HRES 1160 is the only instance where this was done to bypass opposition from the members of the majority party. Whereas the last instance, an appropriations measure which passed the House failed to include a majority of the majority, was on final passage of the fiscal year 2015 Department of Homeland Security House Appropriations Bill during the 114th Congress. In the months following this failure, Speaker Boehner announced his resignation. Whereas in a January 26, 2024 Dear Colleague, Speaker Johnson called the Senate supplementals and border security legislation dead on arrival in the House. Likewise, in January 2024, Speaker Johnson took a trip to the U.S.-Mexico border where he said, if President Biden wants a supplemental spending bill focused on national security, it better begin by defending America's national security.
See, this is the problem, is he connected two issues that were unrelated. He connected Ukraine aid to immigration policy. Like, if I said, for example, no more aid to Israel until we build a wall on the southern border, most Republican politicians' hair would start standing up on their neck and be like, well, no, that's a little too much. Special relationship. It's different when Ukraine can die. Israel can't. Like, whatever it would be, whatever excuses, it'd be treated a little bit differently. I even think that she treats it differently. Maybe a little less differently than others. But it's tying these two issues together when we know one is incredibly politically divisive, the other one is less politically divisive in the country, and both are completely separate national security issues, deserving of completely separate resolutions and solutions and reforms in order to get progress on them. Like, for example, you can't just send guns to the southern border to solve the issue. It's not like we're just going to send a bunch of like, oh, here's 100 M777 howitzers, and this adds to our border security. That wouldn't work necessarily. You'd have to build certain pieces of infrastructure. You have to increase more staff. It's not the same policy solution. These can be settled differently. In fact, one of the big demands for people like Matt Gaetz and other people in the Freedom Caucus, her included, was that they were sick of all these bundled pieces of legislation, where one piece of legislation, unrelated to another piece of legislation, gets bundled together in order to pass it. But now we're okay with doing that when it comes to immigration policy? I mean, I would think, if anything, they would want immigration policy to be solved on its own, to not have anything that it could hook onto or be used to stop it from passing, since it's something that they care so much about. Not to mention, if this immigration crisis, as they call it, is as important and as urgent, as necessary, and as necessary to solve as they suggest, when there was a deal offered that James Lankford, Republican James Lankford from Oklahoma, and other Democrats negotiated, it would have been taken, even if you didn't get everything you wanted. If it's a real crisis, if I said, hey, you can't get your $5 billion for Hurricane Katrina relief, but you can get $2 billion, you wouldn't say, no, we get nothing. Just to say how it's a little different when it comes to the war, because if we told the Ukrainians, we can't give you 10 billion, we'll give you 5, they'll take the 5 no matter what, because they're fighting for survival. Just to show how different these issues are and how I think they should be settled differently. But Mike Johnson didn't like that idea. He paired them together. And then when Donald Trump came out and said, no immigration solving during this election, it's going to undercut my chances, then it was dead on arrival. And Mike Johnson, by making that commitment, had boxed himself in. And there was no way to avoid it, because he couldn't pass immigration reform with Ukraine aid, because it would hurt Trump's election chances, and Trump didn't like that. But he also made a commitment that he wouldn't pass Ukraine aid without immigration reforms. And so it was either do nothing or take an L somewhere. And he chose to take an L somewhere.
Whereas in the months following his border trip, Speaker Johnson introduced a $95 billion foreign aid supplemental with no border security attached. Whereas excuses like, this is just how you have to govern in divided government.
I mean, true, but also, where's the anger towards Trump for telling them to stop with the immigration reform? I guess she's like less angry because it wasn't enough immigration reform, but some immigration, like a lot of these concessions Democrats gave, they won't give again. If Democrats win back the Senate, win back the House especially, but I mean, even if Republicans win the Senate and the House, they still need 60 votes in the Senate. And so you still are going to have to negotiate to them with Democrats to some degree here, and not accepting those concessions when Democrats are willing to give them due to the implications of what no aid to Ukraine would bring. I mean, they really lost an opportunity there. But then again, maybe it's good we didn't set the precedent. But I mean, bundling unrelated things together is already a precedent. But I don't like it being done with those types of national security issues.
Are pathetic, weak, and unacceptable. Even with our razor-thin Republican majority, we could have at least secured the border, with it being the #1 issue in the country and the issue that is actually causing Biden to trail President Trump in poll after poll.
Recent polling data shows Biden up, either in the Decision Desk HQ count, recent Emerson polling. I think I saw a poll this morning that had Biden up 6 points. Not saying that none of the polls have Trump up. I think the Ramstein poll has him up as always. But come on.
Whereas Speaker Johnson's capitulation on
it's cute that she can't even go through a completely unrelated speech without like glazing Trump on his polling numbers in case he might be watching.
The border, with it being the #1 issue in the country and the issue that is actually causing Biden to trail President Trump in poll after poll. Whereas Speaker Johnson's capitulation on his promise to secure the border came on the heels of Laken Riley being brutally murdered, women and children being raped by illegal alien monsters, and our own Border Patrol and Texas National Guard being run over by hordes of military-aged illegals. Whereas great legislation like H.R. 2 and the Laken Riley Act are only messaging bills unless we fight to enforce them in our government funding bills. Whereas while serving on the House Judiciary Committee, Mike Johnson was a strong defender of individual liberties and was the chair of the subcommittee on the Constitution of Limited Government. Despite his history as a defender of civil liberties on April 12, 2024, Mike Johnson...
It's wild that, you know, she can give so much anger directed towards a group of undocumented immigrants, which are largely speaking, not committing crime. Largely speaking, committing crime at lower rates than native-born citizens. They're monsters. But if you describe, like, the death pits produced by the Russian army, they're the defenders of Christianity in Ukraine. Like, they have rifles with orders to, like, execute people, and, like, they're the defenders of Christianity. Somebody poor trying to seek a better life by crossing the border, even illegally. Monster. I don't know. I feel like her spectrum of morality is a little crooked here, huh?
Passed the deciding vote against requiring a warrant for U.S. persons queries of Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, FISA, Section 702 data. Whereas our conference could have also taken out...
By the way, when we say military-age males, what does that even mean? Are we like 18 to 25 or to 30? Like, are we talking about American recruitment? Or are we literally saying anyone between the ages of 18 and 65? Because that's a broad age range.
Funding for abortion and the trans agenda on kids. If our own speaker would have allowed us to offer amendments instead...
House will be in order. Members will kindly take their conversations outside the chamber. Gentlewoman's recognized.
Instead, Mike Johnson worked with Chuck Schumer rather than the conference and gave Joe Biden and the Democrats everything they wanted. No different from how a speaker...
How could you say that? Like, for example, the immigration negotiations. James Langford got a lot of concessions out of Democrats. And Democrats got some things in the immigration bill, but it was like, I mean, I don't want to call it table scraps, but it was not a lot. It was not a lot. For example, we've been asking for forever as Democrats for progress on Dreamers, to get Dreamers full citizenship in the United States, to finally settle the issue of these people who know nothing but the United States. They know no other country. If you were to send them back to Honduras, they'd literally not even know how to speak the language in many instances. They'd know nothing about how to survive there. And we got no progress on that issue whatsoever, even though that's been one of the Democrats' #1 issues on immigration for forever. But they knew if they put that in there, it could complicate the bill, make it more difficult to get Republican support, and it wasn't put in there. This idea that, you know, Democrats just got the Republicans to do their bidding in the House, I think is contrasted by the fact that to pass a bill that is basically the same in support of Ukraine took 6 months of just like fluffing the political egos of these people and trying to scare them with intelligence reports.
Jeffries would have done. Whereas Speaker Johnson fully funded Special Counsel Jack Smith's witch hunt and 91 indictments against President Trump,
okay, can I just say, taking the position of, hey, let's just defund all of the investigations into Donald Trump, shut him down, shut down the investigation, shut him down. I gotta say, doesn't sound like you're the big champion of transparency.
Republican presidential nominee. House Republicans could have used our power of the purse to stop this, but Speaker Johnson didn't even let us try. Whereas Joe Biden's weaponized DOJ is arresting a new January 6th election protester every single day.
Woo! Sorry. Couldn't keep myself contained.
And putting nonviolent political enemies, including veterans, mothers, and fathers, and grandparents in jail for years. And the 5th January 6th defendant has now committed suicide. Whereas our pro-life Christian conservative Republican Speaker Mike Johnson fully funded the Department of Justice as it is prosecuting and convicting peaceful pro-life activists who are facing 11 years in jail. Again, refusing to allow Republicans to offer amendments to stop these injustices. Whereas actions are the only thing that matter, and words are meaningless without following through on them. By passing the Democrats' agenda and handcuffing Republicans' ability to influence legislation, our elected Republican Speaker Mike Johnson has aided and abetted the Democrats and the Biden administration in destroying our country.
She talks about it as if like the Democrats are like aided and abetted. She's talking about the Democrats as if they're like a terrorist group. So the Democrats who just aided and abetted, really destroying the country.
Whereas removing this uniparty speaker will not give the speaker's gavel to the Democrats, which would only happen if Republicans actually vote for Hakeem Jeffries.
House will be in order.
And they're having fun over there. They must be busting out popcorn.
Gentlewoman will suspend.
Pop-Tarts. They're all in their pajamas.
Gentlewoman is recognized.
In fact, Minority Leader Jeffries, Nancy Pelosi, and other high-ranking Democrats have publicly stated they will save Mike Johnson from a vote to vacate him. In a recent interview, Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries said, "Even though we're in the minority, we effectively have been governing as if we were in the majority."
Speaker, the House is not in order.
Stop them! Stop them!
Whereas our country is nearly $35 trillion in debt, and about $40 billion are added to the debt every day. Our border is overrun by illegal invaders and terrorists from over 160 countries. Our people are being killed.
Wait, terrorists from over 100? Okay, does she mean that people have crossed the southern border from 160 countries? Or does she mean that we have confirmed examples of terrorists from over 160 countries entering the United States from the southern border illegally? Because I can believe the former, I cannot believe the latter.
By the hundreds every single day by fentanyl. And Mike Johnson refuses to do anything about it. Whereas Mike Johnson is ill-equipped to handle the...
Mike Johnson. I want him to act on the fentanyl crisis. I want Mike Johnson to snort all the fentanyl for America.
rigors of the...
Okay, I mean, there was that one fentanyl sweetener that was added to the Ukraine aid that was kind of shot down that would have paid more money for fentanyl scanners at legal points of entry, which is how the majority of fentanyl from the southern border does enter the United States. It is through legal points of entry.
The job of Speaker of the House and has allowed a uniparty, one that fuels foreign wars, tramples on civil liberties, and increases our disastrous national debt, to take complete control of the House.
Reminder that Donald Trump added more to the national debt than any president in U.S. history in one term.
House of Representatives. Whereas Speaker Johnson's tenure is defined by one self-serving characteristic, when given a choice between advancing Republican priorities or allying with the Democrats to preserve his own personal power, Johnson regularly chooses to ally himself with Democrats. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the office of the Speaker of the House of Representatives...
Gentlewoman will suspend. The House will be in order.
Damn, she didn't get to finish. She just got shut down. It's done. Okay, are we going for a vote?
Gentlewoman's recognized.
Resolved that the...
Oh, no. Oh, you're just settling them down. Okay, okay.
The office of the Speaker of the House of Representatives is hereby declared to be vacant.
The chair will now recognize the gentlewoman from Georgia to offer the resolution just noticed. Does the gentlewoman from Georgia offer the resolution?
Yes.
The clerk will report the resolution.
Whereas the House Republican Conference elected Mike Johnson on October 25, 2023, after 3.5 weeks of trying to decide on a new Speaker of the House. Whereas Mike Johnson sent the Republican Conference a letter making promises as to what type of Speaker he would be and outlining his plans going forward. Mike Johnson put forth 7 tenets that would guide the conference under his speakership. 1. restore trust by ensuring total transparency, open processes, and regular order. 2, advance a comprehensive policy agenda supported by conference consensus. 3, promote individual members.
Okay, it's the same thing. Can we just, I don't want to listen to this again. Oh my God, is it the same speech?
Our people are being killed by the hundreds every single day.
Oh my God, it literally is. Okay, here's the vote on a motion to table. So what happened was, Steve Scalise, who is a leading Republican congressman, who was a likely candidate to be Speaker of the House before Mike Johnson was kind of hoisted into the position because Steve Scalise came up short in the race to be House Speaker, he put forward a motion to table. So what a motion to table is, to be blunt, it kills the bill. It's a question and asks the conference, like, hey, instead of voting on this and deciding whether we should have it or not have it, can we just not? That's what a motion to table is. And if you look here, the Republicans were quicker to vote in favor of tabling the legislation than the Democrats. And you can see that actually, while Democrats are coming forward to basically save Mike Johnson here, as you can see from 112 Democratic votes, 169 Republican votes, more votes coming in. The majority votes against tabling are from Democrats because there are progressive Democrats who don't want to vote for Mike Johnson under any circumstances, even after he passed aid to Ukraine, because Mike Johnson is still Mike Johnson. He's still incredibly homophobic. He still is against any of the type of reform that progressives want, and he also wants to roll back a lot of the stuff that the progressives and Democrats have been able to win, the small victories we've been able to get, and the bigger victories we've been able to get. Not to mention, he was a big champion for Donald Trump's election steal moves when he was trying to challenge the results of the election while claiming that the election was stolen when it wasn't. So, I think there's definitely a class of Democrats that were never going to protect Mike Johnson no matter what. So still, at the end of the day, the Democrats that are against motion, tabling this are the most progressive ones generally, and they're with the most fringe Republicans. Because right now there's only 4 Republicans that are voting against tabling it. Let's skip forward. We don't need to wait. I want to see how many Republicans end up voting against tabling. So far it's 8, it's 10, 11.
Without objection.
11. Do you know what this means? Without Democrats, this Mike Johnson would have been recalled as House Speaker. Without Democrats coming forward and putting some votes in favor of tabling this motion, if it was just a up and down vote, and Democrats voted against him being House Speaker, as they usually do, because they want Hakeem Jeffries to be House Speaker, then he would have been recalled. So, this does mean that winning over their support while passing Ukraine aid was essential for Mike Johnson to keep his job as House Speaker.
This vote, the yeas are 359, the nays are 43, with 7 answering present. The motion is adopted. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
And cheers all around.
Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the unfinished business is the vote on passage of House...
And that's it. That's it. It's over. That was the whole thing right there. I will say that Mike Johnson did walk by a CBS News live stream, and he was asked about what he thought about today's events, and he didn't really give an answer.
Successful. It looks like the speaker is coming by. Speaker Johnson, are you concerned Congressman Greene will bring this up again, sir?
There we go, live television, exactly the question to ask, which leads me to my next one. What do we think is next on this front, Nicole?
Well, again, I think that is the big question because, again, the Congresswoman also hasn't ruled out potentially bringing up this again, although it's clear that there is not the appetite, as I started to say before the Speaker walked by. In terms of that motion to table, it was something, again, introduced not by Democrats who did put out there that they would potentially table her motion if she brought it up. But, again, that was brought up by Majority Leader Steve Scalise, and it was supported overwhelmingly. I believe the final tally was 359 to 40. 3 or so, I'll have to check my math. There were 7 who voted present. But anyway, an overwhelming vote to table her measure. So whether or not there's going to be the appetite to go through this exercise over and over again, it doesn't seem that there is that desire. Furthermore, the House is due to recess for the rest of the week. So we will have to see potentially when they come back if this continues to be a thing. But at least for now, Congresswoman Greene's motion has been defeated.
Man, Marjorie Taylor Greene takes the fat L after all the the chest pounding and the big claims and the taking on of the uniparty and the swamp, etc., etc. For months and months and months, the threat of Mike Johnson losing his speakership to crumble in such a brutal fashion, curb stomping, really, which we just watched, a legislative curb stomping with that tabled motion overwhelmingly getting voted in favor of. But again, without the Democratic votes, and this is something that Democrats should understand, and they should realize the leverage they do have here. Without the Democratic votes, Mike Johnson, if it was just an up and down votes, and the 11 who voted against tabling the motion, if they presumably voted for recalling Mike Johnson, hell, I mean, they really only needed 3 or 4, then he would not be able to stay a House Speaker. So Democrats did go out there and help him a lot today. And in the scenario where it would have been just an up or down vote, Democrats would have been necessary in order to stop Mike Johnson from being removed from the position. And Democrats need to realize the leverage that they have here and use it accordingly.